Good afternoon from Mickey and from me from Castle Goring. Well, before I start, I will say that we have some heavy-duty stuff, but we also have some levity. So if I may, I will start with the lightest and we will continue to the heaviest. The very lightest is the fact that one or two people have written in to me to ask me why I haven't given a shout out yet to my son Dima, because my son Dima has started to do a YouTube channel on money. I have to tell you, I'm very proud of him, but money is not a subject I understand very much about. But he does some really interesting videos, so I'm going to suggest to those of you who would like to look into it, he has his own channel and it's Dima Ziadie on YouTube, spelled D-I-M-A-Z-I-A-D-I-E. That's the first thing. The second thing is, although we're going to be progressively more serious, today we are going to end up on a very light note, because at the end of this, Mark Sykes is going to come and he is going to treat us to his tale about my parents-in-law, the 11th Duke and Duchess of Argyll, who had a very interesting scene at Maxim's in Paris before I was born. So I don't know very much about it except what I was told. Anyway, without further ado, I will therefore plunge right in now. And we're starting with the lighter stuff first, as I said. So, NS says, Lady C, what do you think about Harry suing the British government for his security? I really think this is another attempt by Megsy and Hats to stay relevant and in the headlines. After all, they need some drama for Netflix. I mean, I did say we're going to start out with levity, and this is beyond levity. This is levitating above reason. The idea that Harry would be suing his grandmother's government, and therefore his grandmother in reality, because his grandmother is the person in whom all laws are vested and justice is vested. You couldn't make it up. You really couldn't make it up. Well, the fact of the matter is, this is a perfect cover story for Harry and Meghan to say, well, we're not going to get the security that we need security, and we need titles for the children, prince and princess. Otherwise, we're not going to get security. And if we don't have security, our lives are in danger, and their lives are in danger. And we've got to protect our young, the lion and lioness, protecting their young against the marauding animals in the jungle. It's very narcissistic behavior. It's very nasty behavior. It sets up the situation where no matter the outcome, they will be victims and they will be able to play the victim card. Harry knows the way these things work. I mean, Harry knows that his aunt, Princess Anne, was the victim of a kidnap attempt. Her protection officer during that kidnap attempt was shot 3 times. He knows she doesn't have perpetual security. She only has protection when she is doing official duties. Same thing with Prince Edward. Not that he has been a victim of a kidnapping attempt. Harry has moaned and groaned about the fact that the last time he was here, he was followed by the paparazzi. Very interesting that, because the footage shows Harry arriving and leaving without being followed by anybody. And there were no photographs ever published here or anywhere of the notional paparazzi that were busy chasing their sweet, very important and totally in demand Harry. Yes, they also need footage for Netflix. And a part of this has been that Harry would show how important he was because he would have the perks of protection. Now, you may not realize what the perks of protection are, but I'm going to tell you what the perks of official protection are and why it is not systematically given to royals generally, but only to a few royals particularly. There are the outriders, so they get in their cars, and traffic is cleared for them. They never have to stop at a red light. They just proceed like Moses parting the Red Sea. They just proceed magically. Harry wants that. He wants the blue lights, he wants the outriders, he wants the car in front and behind where traffic gets stopped at intersections and they whiz through. He wants everybody on Netflix to see how important he is. There's also another purpose to all of this, because Harry had to know that there was no way he was going to be able to succeed, because he knows the way things are done and what the parameters are. So, if he fails, he can say, well, it's not safe for us to come to the United Kingdom, so we're not coming. Well, that's very convenient, especially as how Harry knows and Meghan knows that if they come to the United Kingdom at this stage, she especially will most likely be pelted with rotten eggs and tomatoes. It's a great way out. They are victims of a cruel and inhumane and heartless system. And he also knows that his offer of paying for the police protection is rubbish. He knows it's complete nonsense and he's playing the card because he's a vicious little oik. That's what he is. And he knows that if he plays the card, he ends up being a victim and he ends up being noble. Oh, I'm prepared to pay for my security. Oh, so it's the mean and awful royal family and the mean and awful establishment. They don't like me because I married a woman of colour and I have children of colour. Yes, we're the victims of racism and an evil world. Except Harry knows that there are only a finite number of officers who are actually trained to do what he is asking them to do and let him pay for. he knows there are no spares lying around the place. You know, they don't hang around waiting for some jerk of a prince and his bigger jerk of a wife to come swanning over. And of course, they would then keep everybody at bay so that nobody would get near to them to hurl the rotten tomatoes and the eggs. Also, Harry knows, as well as I do, that the matter is decided between Priti Patel, the Home Office, the Police Scotland Yard, and it is done on a need basis. Now, first of all, Harry was not chased, insofar as I can see, by the paparazzi when he was here. So I think that's along the lines of Meghan with her endless complaints to the LA and Toronto police about being harassed, but nobody could ever find the ghosts who were harassing her. So really, it wasn't the ghost and Mrs. Muir. It was ghosting Meghan and the ghosts of her ghostly imagination. But even if the paparazzi had been chasing him, they're not a security threat. They're not a security threat ever. You want to avoid them putting your life in danger? Let them take their wretched picture. As simple as that. The whole thing is typical of Harry and Meghan. And don't for a second believe that she's not up to her remanufactured nose in all of this, because you can bank on it that she is. Well, of course, they've also managed to yet again work themselves into the news. Gosh, all I can say is Shakespeare was absolutely right. Serpent's teeth, thankless children. An American in Paris and New York says, there's a story circulating that Meghan and the Democrats have been discussing the possibility of her being offered one of the 2 New York Senate seats if Kirsten Gillibrand and Chuck Schumer make it onto the 2024 ticket. Please check it out and let's have your thoughts on the subject. An American in Paris and New York? I hope your name isn't Elizabeth Taylor or Van Johnson. To those of you who are old enough. No, that's completely wrong. That was the last time I saw Paris. An American in Paris was Gene Kelly, wasn't it? Well, I am thinking back 60 years. So sorry for the slip of the memory. I think it's a very good question, and yes, I have checked it out. And evidently, gosh, you're well informed. There have been discussions, and I gather that Meghan is ever helpful. My gosh, she's not going to be just a little paralegal in suits. She's going to be a big-time senator, just like Hillary. Well, let's see if she is as successful as Hillary. Because remember, Hillary hasn't yet achieved the ambition that both she and Meghan have to be President of the United States of America. But yes, evidently, the subject has been discussed. Really, doesn't the plot thicken? Daphne Huff says, listening to you, Lady C, beginning to wonder if this vindictive accusation against Andrew isn't a case of a woman scorned. Maybe he rejected her. Sounds as if she had an amazing number of bedfellows, and as she received money for favours, was obviously a willing participant. There is no doubt, my dear, that she was a willing participant and that she actually received hundreds of thousands of dollars from Jeffrey Epstein. There's no doubt about that. She, on a weekly basis, according to her ex-boyfriend, was given $4,000 for trafficking other girls to Epstein. She never met Epstein until she was over the age of consent. All claims to the contrary are lies. They are provable lies. They have been the subject of depositions, etc. The people who want to know the truth only need to research it. There doesn't need to be a mystery about any of this. Nobody needs to be under any misapprehension as to the role this woman has played. She was living with somebody who was charged with carnal crimes, shall we say, since this is YouTube, of trafficking. She was living with him, I think 2 years before she met Epstein, if my memory is correct. She was in rehabilitation for drug and alcohol abuse and prostitution 2 years before she met Epstein. And yes, you're right to have the interpretation that it could be a woman scorned, because Prince Andrew says he definitely didn't. I know from people who know very well that he definitely wouldn't, because his interests don't lie in any such direction. There are also other anomalies, such as the fact that the photograph clearly shows that she is exuberant with delight at having met Prince Andrew. He was hardly going to be posing for a photograph with somebody he was going to be taking advantage of. I mean, even he isn't that dumb. Not even Harry would be that dumb. Also, March of that year, that night was one of the coldest on record. Look at the way she is dressed. There's something deeply suspicious about the way she is dressed in summer clothes. Putting that to one side, the fact of the matter is there are always and have always been, and certainly in those days always were, photographers outside of Tramp to see people coming and going. If Prince Andrew had been seen coming and going, why is there no photograph of him? That's one question I ask. Another question that really they need to answer is, since Tramp doesn't allow you into its club unless you are over the drinking age, which is 18 in this country, and she was allowed in, that means that she would have put herself forth as being over 18. So even if they had been there together, and even if a host of people had seen them there together, it doesn't prove that she's underage. It proves that she said she was over the age for drinking, which is 18. And also, people don't seem to be able to get it through their thick skulls that in this country, the age of consent is 16. In New York, when all of that was going on, it was if you were 17, you were over the age of consent. There is no doubt that in terms of the law, she was always over the age of consent. Her own statement to her friend, the friend whom she ferreted out, induced into her web of iniquity and sin, which was also Epstein's web of iniquity and sin, because I have to tell you, I don't approve of people who behave like that. I don't want to sound like a terrible priss and an awful moralist, but I think that behavior like that is deeply sleazy and unattractive and undesirable. However, this girl, Carolyn Adriano, says that she told her that she had managed to get Andrew into bed. Notice the way she put it as a boast, and that she is the one who did the tracking. I am afraid that the huntress does not have the right, after she has predatorily gone after her big game and attacked it and damaged it, to say that it is the predator and that she is the prey. No. If of her own comment to Carolyn Adriano, who incidentally has stated firmly she doesn't believe that Virginia Roberts was a victim in this situation, that she doesn't believe that she deserves 1 penny compensation, that she knew what she was doing and she did it for the money, and there is no doubt she was over the age of consent. So whether she was a minor or not, in terms of Congress, means she was able to give adult consent. The anomalies of the law may be awkward, but the fact of the matter is we need to respect them. Madge McKinley says, why aren't the defense lawyers going after Virginia Baby? She has quite the past, but no one says anything bad about her. Very bizarre. Well, I'll take the last part first. It is deeply disturbing to me, and should be to any freedom-loving person and any lover of justice, that the mainstream media are systematically silent on a subject that they have a wealth of knowledge and information on. They know as well as I do that Virginia Roberts, whatever happened in her life, and yes, if she was interfered with when she was 8 and she went off the rails, she deserves our compassion. That doesn't mean that 10 years later and 9 years later, she is not responsible for her actions. You know, Virginia Roberts isn't the only person who has had a troubled past. There are many people who have had troubled pasts, who haven't become vindictive, money-grubbing blackmailers, but who have remained kind and decent and honourable people. The mainstream media on both sides of the Atlantic do not want to go after Virginia Giuffre because they would prefer to go after the royal family for political reasons. The reasons are different on either side of the Atlantic Ocean, but they are all political. Whether it is the left-wing press in this country, which is decidedly anti-monarchist, or the right-wing segments of the press that are anti-monarchist, the Rupert Murdoch newspapers, and Rupert Murdoch controls a large swathe of newspapers in this country. Between Rupert Murdoch and the left-wing press, we are speaking about a good 80 to 85% of the newspapers, national newspapers in this country. In the United States, it's pretty much the same percentage. It's just the reasons might be slightly different. But they're not necessarily anti-monarchist, but they are very much in favour of presenting themselves as champions of David over Goliath. Well, what is really interesting about this is that we need to ask who is David and who is Goliath in this instance, but I'll get to that in a moment. The fact of the matter is, Prince Andrew's lawyers have started to go after Virginia Baby. And there is all sorts of stuff going on. And I'm going to read something about what David Boyes, her lawyer, has said. Because in a scathing response to Andrew's lawyer's demands for Virginia Giuffre's medical records, David Boyes said, she wouldn't misremember sexual abuse by a Prince of England. And he's absolutely right, she wouldn't misremember it. But she would lie about it. And why she wouldn't misremember it is that initially she was very clear about the fact that Prince Andrew had not interfered with her. And I'll tell you better. She was absolutely categoric about the fact that Andrew had treated her properly and that she was in awe of meeting this prince. So it's really interesting that as the prospect of money and power came into the equation, she then remembered, and no, she didn't misremember Mr. Boyes, she didn't misremember. She invented, it's quite clear, she invented, because she was either speaking the truth initially or she's lying now. And I see no reason to believe that she was lying initially. While I can see millions of reasons that have flooded into her bank account for why she has been lying since she discovered abuse where patently none existed. Legal Eagle says, 2 questions. 1, what do you make of Virginia Giuffre's statement? She wrote on Twitter early on Friday morning after Judge Lewis A. Kaplan's verdict. I'm pleased with Judge Kaplan's ruling yesterday that allows my case against Prince Andrew to go ahead. I'm glad I will have the chance to continue to expose the truth. Mickey, catch that flying pig! It says VRG. It doesn't say MS. Meghan Markle, Sussex. No, it says Virginia Roberts Giuffre. Catch it, Mickey, catch it. It's whizzing around. Well, Mickey's going to alight on my head. I'm glad I will have the chance to continue to expose the truth. And I am deeply grateful to my extraordinary legal team. I'm sure you are, darling. They're what's keeping you out of prison. A lifetime in prison. Their determination helps me seek justice for those who hurt me and so many others. What about those who you have hurt and who didn't hurt you? My goal has always been to show, and this is the corker. I mean, you talk about a brazen hussy. My goal has always been to show that the rich and powerful are not above the law and must be held accountable. Virginia Giuffre is most likely richer than Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew doesn't have any great deal of money. He has an income, but he doesn't have any great deal of money. She's made herself millions and millions and millions selling those versions of her memories that keep on changing as the figures get larger and larger and the memories grow and grow. So she's rich and she's powerful, and you tell me, who's more powerful? Virginia Giuffre, backed by David Boies, who's the Clintons' lawyer, with a Clinton judge in place and his sidekick, Kaplan and Prescott. Who's more powerful? And the promise of a member of the family to end up being a Democratic senator for New York? Who's more powerful? Or Prince Andrew? Where's Prince Andrew's power? The royal family has soft power. They have influence. And they have integrity rather more than people like the Clintons, who are notorious in certain quarters, evidently, for their Machiavellianism. And the fact that they don't scruple to do what is necessary to advance their cause at all times. This is not true of the royal family. They do scruple. They are not that effective. Look at the way Harry and Meghan have run rings around them. Look at the way Virginia Giuffre and David Boies are running rings around them. Who's rich and powerful? They're all rich and powerful. It's just a matter of who is the richer and the more powerful of the two teams. Or I should say, the two sets of adversaries. Anyway, to finish off the quote, I do not walk this path alone. You certainly don't, darling. You have half the Democratic Party behind you. Let me pick it up from the beginning again. I do not walk this path alone, but alongside countless other survivors of sexual abuse and trafficking. Well, no, you don't walk this path alone? Were you a survivor of sexual abuse and trafficking? Is a very good question. You were a minor, but be over the age of consent. When your parents were allowing you to travel with Epstein, you were a trusted member of Epstein's circle. You were one of his consiglieri. You were so trusted by Epstein that he sent you to Thailand to pick up one of the girls for him and to do a massage course. Sweetie pie, I don't know how many idiots out there you've duped, but there are loads of people out there who are not idiots and cannot be duped. I'm one of them. You would not have been terrified into going there at the age of, I think you were 20. I think you were 20 or 21. You were trusted by Epstein, by your own account, and this is your own account. Epstein asked you to be a surrogate and have a baby for him and for Ghislaine Maxwell. This shows that you were trusted by them. This shows that you were right in there with them. And if you were abused at 8 years old, it doesn't alter the fact that you made choices as an adult. And even before you were an adult, while you were over the age of consent, even before you reached the age of consent, you made choices between right and wrong, and you had to have known that they were right or wrong. If you didn't know that they were right or wrong then, you don't know the difference between right or wrong now. So you were a sociopath then, and you're a sociopath now. You can't have it both ways. You know, there's such a thing as morality in life, and there's such a thing as honor and integrity and decency. And you can't play the victim when you were the perpetrator. And if you were victimized by others, you deserve sympathy. But you do not deserve sympathy for victimizing other people. You, for instance, victimized that girl, Carolyn Adriano. You are the one who procured her, trained her up, groomed her, instructed her. You did it. Her evidence was clear. Ghislaine Maxwell didn't do it. You did it. And you are now trying to pretend that you are some innocent. You're as guilty as sin. You are as guilty as sin. And by your own account, and I'm going off your account, you seduced a prince, were paid $15,000 for doing it. You hopped on that plane of your own free will with your parents' consent. Don't tell me at the age of 17 you didn't know that the tens of thousands of dollars that you were getting from Epstein were wrong. Excuse me. You know, people in life need to stop being namby-pamby, and where somebody is in the wrong, they're in the wrong, and where they're in the right, they're in the right. It's called judgment. People need to exercise judgment and discernment. Yes, if you do, it deprives you of righteous indignation when And when you're being a bleeding heart and being irrational, it deprives you of the pleasure of wallowing in victimhood. But I'll tell you something, as somebody who was a victim, genuine victim of a true accident of nature, and then all the consequences that came thereafter. No victim enjoys playing the victim card. No victim does. And you can bank on it. When people pretend to be victims, it's because they're not. Now, I'm not saying that there are not genuine victims in all of this, but it's very suspicious that this woman, who is clearly one of the ace operatives at the highest level in the decadent Epstein scenario, is trying to portray herself as a victim. The second part of the question is, the Sunday Times have been at it again. Their front page has a headline, Andrew accused of victim blaming over new tactics. You previously said that you take the Sunday Times. Did you see the article, and if so, what did you think of it? Yes, I did see the article. It's on the front page of the Sunday Times, which I have right here with me. I'm going to read out something from somebody called Dr. Charlotte Proudman, a barrister and a Cambridge academic specializing in violence against women. She said of the Duke's strategy, it's the ultimate in victim blaming. A lot of victims of abuse understandably reach out for therapeutic support. Andrew's lawyers are trying to discredit her. Yes, they're trying to discredit her because she's not a victim of Prince Andrew. She is a victim of her own greed and possibly of her own imagination. Of what she herself said, he never tampered with her. He didn't do anything but meet her. She was thrilled to meet him. She asked him to pose for a photograph for her to send to her family, which she did. That is not victim blaming. Exposing somebody's lies and the inconsistencies and contradictions of their claims, which clearly are totally at odds with what they said initially, is not victim blaming. This is not a scenario where some innocent girl is taken to an apartment and there's a party and terrible things happen to her. Or she's walking down a road and somebody jumps out of the bushes, grabs her by the scruff of her neck, and does terrible things to her. It's not victim blaming, and I do wish that academics and people of that nature would inform themselves of the facts before they start to hurl incendiary and unfounded allegations at somebody who is quite rightly trying to expose the inconsistencies in an accuser's accusations. You know, just because she's a woman doesn't mean she's truthful. Women have been lying since the beginning of time and will continue to lie till the end of time. Men aren't the only ones who lie. All this namby-pamby, politically correct rubbish that certain segments of the population are innocent and others are guilty, when it all comes down to individual conduct. Also, since the woman is a barrister, she ought to know that what she has said is totally irresponsible. But she's but one of many, because the Sunday Times has a very anti-monarchist agenda, as does the whole of the Rupert Murdoch organization. And there are other people. Nazir Afzal, the former chief prosecutor in the Rochdale grooming scandal, said, "He's trying to muddy the waters and attack her credibility. It would be frowned upon in this country. I see no reason why it wouldn't be frowned upon in America." Excuse me, your comments are an outrage. If you are a proper prosecutor, you ought to know only too well that if somebody has been revealed to be a liar, you need to expose their lies. You can't pretend that they're truthful. The woman is a self-confessed liar and perjurer. I mean, really, where do these people get off with just because the man is a prince? I don't care whether he's a prince or a pauper, he's a human being. And since when was justice only reserved for the underbelly of society? Since when? It's outrageous. You people really need to understand the difference between right and wrong and stop playing your stupid, revolting, reprehensible political games. KF says, "I have read that Alan Dershowitz used the deal between Virginia Roberts and Epstein when she tried to sue him. He got it dismissed. How can it be okay for him and not for Prince Andrew? I agree with you, Lady C. Potential defendant is what it says on the tin. I also read she settled a suit against Maxwell some years ago for an undisclosed amount, but I don't know if this is true. Do you know anything about that?" Yes, it's true. Yes, it's true. She has made millions out of litigating. Millions. And I'll tell you something. If what she has been saying was true, she's entitled to those millions. But of her own comments, of her own changeable versions of the facts, she can't be entitled to a penny. Because she can't have been X one day and Y another. It doesn't make sense. And yes, why is it that Alan Dershowitz, who is one of the most eminent advocates in the United States of America and regarded in legal circles as one of the finest advocates of all time, why is it that it worked for him and not for Prince Andrew? I'll tell you why. Alan Dershowitz is a Democrat. Louis A. Kaplan is a Democrat. President Clinton is a Democrat. Hillary Clinton is a Democrat. Prince Andrew is a British prince. If they can hang him out to dry, make him into a sacrificial lamb, divert attention away from Bill Clinton, have Hillary present herself as the champion of the underdog. Well, that's a joke if ever there was one. I mean, I actually thought she was a very able, if not very admirable Secretary of State, but she certainly is bright, very bright. One would never question her ability. Maybe her morality or integrity or scrupulousness would be something else, but certainly she's very able. But the fact of the matter is, Andrew is being hung out to dry, and it's all for political reasons. Blue Skies Eyes 7 says, what are your thoughts re who is behind the anti-royal attitudes that are being espoused by the BBC? Is it an attempt to get rid of the monarchy? Yeah, in a short word. Also, why is only Prince Andrew being pursued? Guilty or not? What about all the other wealthy men who were involved? Why are they not being taken to court? Very good question. Very good question. Well, the answer is they're not princes. They're not as naive and gullible as Andrew. Princes are, by and large, very protected. They are, in some ways, very experienced, and in other ways, perennial children. If you add into that mix not a great deal of intelligence, you begin to see why Andrew is the ideal victim, the ideal scapegoat. And the BBC, without a doubt, it is anti-monarchist. You know, just imagine how Amal Rajan treated his program on Harry and William. The BBC is always pushing Harry and Meghan and giving them attention, positive attention, and either completely ignoring the work of all of the other royals or then being denigrating about them. Because it shows that the comment made the other day by someone that my viewers are the most intelligent, astute, and sophisticated and knowledgeable on the whole of YouTube. And I'm going to let him answer a lot of the question, because he says, I hope that everyone understands that Prince Andrew is being sued, not charged in a criminal court. She didn't have evidence to charge him in a criminal court. They don't extradite over lawsuits, so he could totally ignore it. Appearing in court cannot do him any good, because he would just be taking the chance that he would incriminate himself inadvertently, even as you say, by saying something that would allow them to charge him with perjury. It happens all the time. Take the Scooter Libby trial. A reporter stated one thing and Scooter Libby stated something else. There was no other evidence, and the question was over the substance of a short phone conversation that they had an entire year previously. The jury believed the reporter, and Libby spent several years in prison. Yeah. The American justice system, and the Japanese, it has to be said, are well known to be stitch-up merchants of the highest order. They have an unnaturally high success rate of conviction because they are not about justice. They are about the punitive and successful interpretation and execution of the law, which I think is a great pity, because I'm old enough to remember when I was in awe of American justice. And I thought that American justice was wonderful. Well, 50 years is not such a long time as to see that the justice system in America has gone from the peak of Mount Everest to the troughs of the Atlantic Ocean. Goddess 72 says, I think the Queen did a terrible disservice to her own flesh and blood son by her actions. This will be interpreted by the courts, by the complainant and her legal team as an admission that Andrew is not being supported. I cannot understand why she didn't do as exactly Lady CC stated at 49 minutes and 36 seconds. Lady C is totally right. Thank you. And I don't understand why the Queen couldn't come out and say so and let the world know they would fight this tooth and nail and protect their son, who has the presumption of innocence. Goddess USA. Well, Goddess, there are actual reasons, sound reasons for why the royal family has acted as it has acted. They don't actually seem to understand that their nuanced approach goes shooting over the heads of most people. They don't get it. They think that they have deroyalized Prince Andrew and they have freed him as they freed Harry and Meghan to make their way in the bad old world. They don't actually realize that what they think is reducing him to the status of an ordinary citizen doesn't free him only and doesn't protect them effectively, because they're also trying to protect the royal family and the institution of the royal family. And they don't get it. This is where they are out of touch with reality and with the perceptions of people on the street. They think that it is their duty as a royal family to represent all the people, including those who do not agree with them, those who are Republicans, those who have something against them, and those who support them. And that is a part, in fact, that is one of the most essential roles of any royal family in a constitutional monarchy, to embody as representatives all of the people. But it's so nuanced that they think they're selling apples when you have decided they're selling lemons. The average person doesn't seem to understand that a lot of being royal is public service, that is self-sacrifice. The royals are embodying the nation and serving the people of this nation. And they need to do what they need to do, whether they want to do it or not. This is where self-abnegation comes in, and where self-indulgence doesn't even exist. When you get self-indulgent royals like Harry and Meghan, you begin to see the counterfoil. But they actually think that they have freed Andrew to litigate upon this matter privately. And he is now free, and no matter what happens, they have put distance between the institution of the monarchy and Prince Andrew, so that he can litigate as a private citizen. They don't understand that the public doesn't get that he's been deroyalized. They don't get that. And I'm afraid that there's nobody at the palace who's going to be telling them this, because my experience of many of the courtiers is they're either not bright enough, or they're not courageous enough, or they are too self-serving. And when they are not, they can get shoved out. Shades of Lord Gant. Because the royals don't always want to hear what they're supposed to be doing. I hope I've explained to you how the whole situation has evolved. And I agree that the perception is that the royal family has washed its hands of Prince Andrew. But that's not what they have tried to do, and that's not what they think they have done. You see the difference between perception and reality? And because this is going to go on much too long, I'm going to wrap it up with Joyce J.D. says, "Dear Lady C, I hope somehow you see this. I'm totally confused about the difference in meanings of being stripped of one's title, having one's title returned to the Queen and not being able to use HRH, but retaining the titles Duke and Duchess or Prince, etc. What are the practical ramifications of these acts? Are Harry and Prince Andrew now in the same boat? If so, what boat? Thank you, from your American friend." Well, when the term is used that one's title is returned to the Queen, what it means is that they have voluntarily surrendered their right to use it. So there's a voluntary element. If they were stripped of their title, that would mean they were asked to return it, or it was suggested to them that they return it and they refused. Then they're stripped of it. They are stripped of their royal rank. That's what being stripped of royal highness means. Dukes and duchesses are not necessarily royal. There are 26 non-royal dukes in this country, and now 2 royal dukes who have been deroyalized to the extent that they're not allowed to use their royal dignities and styles. So they are effectively now non-royal but still royal dukes, because they remain princes and they remain dukes. Their dukedoms are peerages. You cannot strip, the monarch can't strip anybody of a peerage. That has to be done by an act of parliament. She can strip them of the rank of prince, but it's not been done since 1917, when George V stripped various members of the royal family. For instance, Prince Alistair of Connaught became the Earl of Macduff. So I hope that answers the question. And my own take on it is that Prince Andrew is in a very invidious position, and he should play things very cannily. And if it was suggested to me by a former senior member of the royal household that Prince Andrew should offer to give up the use of the rank of prince, to give up the dukedom, or put it in abeyance. The dukedom, they didn't say put it in abeyance, I'm saying, because to put the dukedom of York into abeyance he, as the son of a duke, will become Lord Andrew Windsor. And I think if he invites the Queen to do all of that and makes it absolutely clear in an announcement that he is doing this to protect the royal family, and that as and when this matter is resolved, because you see, the Kaplan is quite determined. It's obvious. Kaplan is very partial, and his rulings so far have been very prejudicial against Prince Andrew. Discomfortingly so, for anybody who respects the law is going to think, excuse me, what's going on here? Why is it okay for Alan Dershowitz, Democrat, but not for Prince Andrew, Royal Duke? Excuse me, it's the same agreement. Why is it applied to one and not to the other? And I think Andrew's legal team should lay the whole thing out so that there can be no misunderstanding where people are concerned, unless they deliberately choose to misinterpret. And then he should litigate the case and do it in such a way that he ensures that he doesn't step foot in the United States of America. And if it goes against him, as Kaplan has given every indication he's determined for it to go against him, in much the same way that he was quite determined that Stephen Donziger would not prevail and Chevron would prevail. So the Ecuadorian people would be diddled out of the compensation for the damage that Chevron did to their country. Once you know what you're dealing with, I mean, I actually have great faith in the average human being. I think the average person is a lot more decent given the opportunity to exercise their decency. And once things are laid out clearly for them so that they can use their heads and hearts, they usually do use them. Obviously, prejudiced people don't, but everybody else, I think, will. And I think he should become Lord Andrew Windsor, litigate the matter, and if one could almost say when it goes against him, because you see, if you're in the hands of a judge who is determined to shove the case in a certain direction, you stand a very little chance of success. In fact, I would say you stand no chance of success. And sadly, that, I think, is the scenario, because Kaplan is quite determined to ignore everything Virginia Giuffre has said about herself. Everything she said about herself. It's not as if to say he would be getting it from anybody else. He's getting it from her. And he's still determined to ignore it. And he's determined to ignore anything that Prince Andrew has going for him. So I think he should simply become Lord Andrew Windsor. It will minimize the damage to the royal family, to the institution. And with the passage of time, people will realize how he has been scapegoated. And on that note, I will say, I'm going to ask Mark to come and join us so that we end on a note of greater levity. Okay? So, well, Mark, you are back by popular demand.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
So, and Mickey says she's glad to have you back as well.
Well, that's very nice of Mickey. Very much appreciated.
So, are you going to tell us all about Big Ian and Wee Wee in Paris with your parents?
Well, it's an interesting footnote or sidelight to the whole story, which might cast a bit of light on Big Ian's general mental and psychological condition at the time. This was probably about 1947 or 1948. And that, of course, was when Big Ian was married to Wee Wee, which is the French word for yes twice, not anything more indecorous, as a nickname.
Yes, Margaret used to call her Wee Wee.
I'm sure. And my parents often used to go to Paris for a long weekend, Thursday to Monday, which was about all you could do on the very miserable amount of money you were allowed to take with you out of the country at that time. So anyway, off they went. One had the weekend to Paris to stay with friends there, and Big Ian and Wee Wee were in Paris and invited them to dinner at Maxim's, which was, and as far as I know still is, one of the great restaurants and temples of gastronomy of the world, painted by Manet and goodness knows what. So off they went, kind of pleased as punch, kind of lovely dinner, kind of glass of champagne, and halfway through dinner, suddenly, as a result of some very minor disagreement between Big Ian and Wee Wee, possibly something as small as who is that person at the table over there? No, it isn't him, it's her, or whatever, some very minor matter. My parents never knew what the disagreement was. Ian suddenly hurled a plate full of food, which, as far as my parents recall, was caneton pressé, which is pressed duck, which is a particular delicacy, delicious French dish, and hurled this plate full of food at Wee Wee, who ducked, and it missed her. And
you have to laugh, really, go on.
and it landed with an enormous crash on the table next door, where 4 French senators with beards and their napkins tucked into their waistcoats were having to dinner, and this plate of food landed in the middle of the table and exploded, scattering bits of little pieces of pressed duck which got stuck in the senators' beards and on their napkins. But to being Maxim's, and then knowing he was a duke, which I think he was by then, it was all hushed up and it was cleared away, and they went on having dinner. More canton pressé was brought to replace that which had been hurled. And a nice evening was had by all, but it is a rather strange thing to do in a way.
Very telling, you know, and it shows the volatility of the man and the unpredictability and the complete disregard for boundaries or decencies or even for decorum, really.
I think to be kind, you have to remember that he had had a pretty unpleasant experience in the war, being in a German prisoner of war camp for 5 years, which you know is a lot more than most people have to go through.
Yes, but Wee Wee had spent those 5 years gathering care packages from Portugal and sending them to Germany, not only for Big Ian, but for all of the fellow officers in the camp. So, you know, if you look at it from that point of view, and also, of course, he used to behave like that before the war.
Did he? Yes.
So,
That's interesting.
yeah. Well, Mark, thank you very much for coming and giving us this little anecdote about my beloved parents-in-law, quote unquote.
It's absolutely been a pleasure to take a little amble down memory lane.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mickey says, woof, 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 woof.
And thank Mickey.
Well, I'm awfully sorry that this has taken as long as it has, but I did want to cover the ground that I thought was important to cover, and also I wanted to introduce an element of levity. Hopefully you have enjoyed this, especially Mark's contribution. May I remind you, if you're interested in money, give my son's YouTube channel a look. It's Dima Ziadie on YouTube, and that's spelled D-I-M-A Z, or Z in America, I-A-D-I-E. Thanks for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and remember, keep the questions coming in. This is not possible without you. God bless and goodbye.